My name is Bliss, 28. I'm an ICU nurse. If you've ever watched someone come back from the edge of nothingness, you know what it's like to hold your breath for a living and call it a day job. I do 12-hour shifts, swaddle IV lines like tiny, judgy snakes, and sleep with the steady hum of hospital machines still ringing in my head. I like to think I'm the kind of person who reacts instead of panics. Turns out that trait is useful when you're resuscitating someone, and toxic when you're resuscitating an entire family's financial life. My sister, Lila, 31, is the successful one. That's not my phrase, it's the family's chorus. Lila posts perfectly curated brunch photos, wears a blazer that somehow says I close deals in every lighting condition, and manages to turn every Zoom call into a humble brag. She's a brand manager at a lifestyle company, a job that sounds glossy on the surface, and in my family's retelling is capital S success. She gets the congratulations, the front row compliments, and the we're so proud of Lila texts from Mom after every little flourish. Mom, Carol, 56, has a voice that makes compliments into currency. She distributes them like Monopoly money, lavish to Lila, stingy to me. Father, Greg, 60, is quieter, the kind of man who laughs at Lila's jokes and shrugs when I say I need weekends to study continuing ed modules for my ICU certifications. They see Lila's highlights. They don't see the sweat, the kindness, or the quiet math that pays the bills. Here's the part nobody knew. Over the last 3 years, I quietly transferred $47,000 to keep them afloat. It wasn't one theatrical bank transfer. It was a million tiny acts of arithmetic and shame. An extra 12-hour shift here, picking up a weekend travel assignment there, racking up overtime that smelled like coffee and fluorescent lights. It was me taking short-term nurse contracts that paid better and then turning around and paying the utility company for the house where my parents and Lila lived. It was small, secret Venmo payments disguised as rent or gift. Checks wired with notes like for car and then shredding the receipts afterwards. I took out a personal loan to cover an IRS notice because Dad's bookkeeping with his small contracting business had been, generously, optimistic. I borrowed against my meager savings once when their car broke down in January. I let my emergency fund shrink to a puddle so that the people whose names had been printed on my birth certificate could keep the lights on without changing the script they'd already written for themselves. Why? Lots of reasons. There's the nurse code. You don't watch someone bleed out and refuse to press the compression. There's the childish hope that someday someone would notice and feel gratitude. Mostly, though, it was habit. I'd been the reliable one ever since we were kids. The kid who'd come home from a shift with bandages my father hadn't seen fit to buy. The sibling who silently kept the thermostat at a temperature that wouldn't start another fight. And it was corrosive. Behind every "so proud of Lila" was a tally mark in my head. Mortgage assistance here, car payment there, a credit card minimum so their credit score didn't tank, $50 here, $1,000 there. Until I looked at my own bank account and realized I'd funded their lifestyle at the cost of my next 6 months of financial breathing room. I couldn't afford an apartment with decent light. I stopped going on dates because I couldn't explain why my paychecks evaporated into family repairs. I told myself the work mattered more than the vanity of owning new furniture. The weirdest thing wasn't the money. It was the story they told about it. Lila's success was evidence, proof that their parenting had worked, proof that someone in the house had it figured out. My sacrifices? Invisible labor. Emotional housekeeping. The kind of thing that, when recognized at all, gets framed as Bliss being helpful. Helpful? Not heroic. Helpful? Not extraordinary. Helpful? Like it's my job to be helpful on top of nursing 20-hour recoveries. So I kept a folder in a bottom drawer labeled Old Receipts. In it were copies of the bank transfers I'd made, the loan paperwork with my name on the dotted line, a spreadsheet I kept on my phone with dates and amounts that looked more like an accountant's obsession than a sister's notes. I documented everything because it made the chaos feel manageable. What's at stake was simple and stupid and enormous. My sanity, my ability to plan a life that wasn't post forever, and the dignity of not being applause for someone else's highlight reel. I was balancing the moral ledger and getting nowhere. And the family narrative continued. Lila smiling, Mom beaming, Dad nodding. I kept my mouth shut. I kept paying. until the ledger stopped being private bookkeeping and started to feel like a kind of theft from myself. It's one thing to give money, it's another thing to be erased while doing it. That quiet, simmering erasure was the seed of everything that came next. The house smelled like lemon oil and reheated ambition. It was one of those family celebration dinners. Dad's small business had landed a new client, Lila had landed a new contract, and Mom had decided this entitled her to a centerpiece of bragging. The dining room was staged like a lifestyle shoot. Candles that never got lit, a table runner that wrinkled under the weight of compliments, and Lila at the head of the table in a blouse that read, "I'm moving up." Even when she breathed, I'd driven over from my shift in scrubs, hair scraped into a hasty bun, hands that still trembled from a night of too many code blues. I told myself I'd be invisible. Arrive, eat, leave. That was the arrangement I'd perfected. Show up so they could keep pretending the family was whole, and I could keep pretending the payments I made weren't chiseling away at me. I'd rehearsed that level of small, invisible performance for years. The conversation that night was a loop. Praise for Lila, a compendium of gentle bragging that all turned into praise for Mom's parenting, and a few perfunctory nods to Dad's hard work. Every sentence was a reminder that success had a face in our family, the kind of face that got framed in the hallway and traded in at Thanksgiving for more clapping. Somewhere between the roast and an overly elaborate truffle cake, Mom mentioned how proud she was that one of her daughters could actually handle money. It was the kind of compliment that landed like a splinter, tiny, specific, and irritating in a way that makes you start picking at it. Lila beamed, and the rest of the room made the noise of being impressed. I bristled, the way you do when something small becomes the straw that shows you the whole camel. I'd absorbed jabs my whole life, the way people joke about someone being too practical. Like that's an insult. I kept my fork on my plate and my voice inside my mouth. I reminded myself, don't make it a thing. Then Mom, in that voice that turned criticism into a spectacle, leaned across the table and said, loud enough for the neighbors and the server who had come with the cake, "Bliss, you're not even fit to tie Lila's shoes." It wasn't a quip. It was a public auctioning of my dignity. A phrase that announced to everyone that my labor, my sacrifices, and my personhood were footnotes to Lila's highlight reel. The room hummed. Lila's smile didn't falter. If anything, she added a little more shine to it, the way someone might polish a trophy with a napkin. Something in me clicked like a bad fuse. Years of being the quiet fixer pressed against one sentence and combusted. "Then go ask her to pay your bills," I said. It came out sharper than I'd planned. Flat and too loud, the kind of sentence that clears a room of pretense. I could feel the sound of it land. There was a fragile second where time did that slow, surreal thing, and I watched faces register. Mom's expression tightened into a practiced confusion. Dad's jaw moved. I could see the little tremor in his Adam's apple that always signaled he was choosing words. Lila blinked like someone caught in a camera flash, part astonishment, part offense. "Bliss," Mom said. The word stretched thin like elastic. "That's uncalled for. Where did you get?" "Oh, I don't know," I said. "Maybe from the receipts I keep in the drawer because I'm the one who hasn't had to worry about whether the lights get turned off." My voice was steadier than I felt. "Maybe from the transfers I make so your car doesn't repo. Maybe from the loan I took out when the IRS sent a scary letter." Lila's face went pale, and for a heartbeat she had the decency to be quiet. Then she laughed, a small, brittle sound, and said, "Bliss, stop making a scene. We don't talk like this in front of guests." Guests, of course. The performance had to continue. The table leaned inward, allies for Mom, witnesses for the spectacle. Aunt June, who always smelled faintly of mothballs and gossip, tightened her lips. Dad put his hand on Mom's arm as if to physically drag the script back into place. The confrontation that followed wasn't cinematic. It was domestic and petty and precise. Mom accusing me of overreacting, Dad asking me not to air family business, Lila playing the stunned younger sibling card like she'd been wronged by my audacity. Someone said, "This is embarrassing." Someone else said, "You're being dramatic." A cousin I'd barely seen chimed in with the kind of neutral judgment that only shows up in living room quarrels. I felt my cheeks go hot. There was a wetness behind my eyes I refused to name. I'd been humiliated in public, not for what I'd done, which was invisible, but for daring to speak truth about the invisible labor that had been keeping the family glued together. The weirdest cruelty was how quickly the room prioritized comfort over truth. A tidy apology would smooth the waves, and the script would continue. But the apology they wanted was the kind that erases the person who gave everything. As Mom's voice climbed, richer and sharper, and Lila's offended performance reached a practiced pitch, I realized the confrontation was no longer a simple rebuttal. It was a pivot point. Either I swallowed and let them reshape the story, or I pushed back and let the story leak into the open. That night, plates scraped, chairs shifted, people edged toward exits. My throat tightened, and for the first time in a long time, I did not back down from the sting. The air was thick with the kind of accusation that comes from people who have never paid a bill in secret for their own parents and then been told they're unfit to be seen. The dinner table felt like a courtroom where everyone had already decided the verdict. Then Dad said, quietly, "Bliss! Enough." And the room held its breath, waiting for me to apologize, to fold, to sign the script again. I sat there and realized I'd crossed a line simply by naming the discomfort they'd been avoiding. The confrontation had begun. I pushed the folder across the table. It made a sound like a verdict. The laminated receipts I'd printed at 3 a.m, bank transfers, Venmo screenshots, loan agreements, a spreadsheet with little ugly columns, lay in a neat fan that had the effect of a dropped mic. For a second, the room forgot how to breathe. "Those are mine," I said. "Every one." Mom's hand hovered over the glossy paper like she might swipe it into a different reality. "Bliss, what is this?" "It's everything I've paid for you two and for Lila over the last 3 years," I said. $47,000. Utilities, car payments, minimums on the credit card when it hit 27% interest, the IRS notice in January. I took out a loan to keep that from turning into a nightmare for you. I kept the receipts in a drawer because apparently the house runs on miracles and secrecy. Lila's face went from polished confidence to a flustered smear. "Bliss, this is insane. What are you trying to do?" I started reading, because reading things out loud makes them true in a way that murmurs don't. March 14th, $2,600, mortgage assist. July 2nd, $1,100, car payment. October 1st, $550, utilities. December 24th, $3,000, taxes, Greg. I said the names with the clinical clarity of someone who spends their life announcing vitals. Every date has a note. Every note has my name in the memo field. Everyone cleared from my account. Someone, Aunt June probably, made a choking sound that was half gasp, half small-town scandal. "Why are you doing this in front of everyone?" Lila demanded, like the optics, not the content, was the crime. "Because you love the optics," I said. "You love the applause and the halo. You don't love the work it takes to keep it." "I do. I've been taking extra shifts, taking contracts, borrowing against my savings. I have interviews I canceled, a shoulder that never quite stopped aching, and a bank account that could be described as a sad, dignified puddle. I've been funding your life while you funded your image. And tonight, when Mom chooses to tell me I'm not fit to tie your shoes in public, I decided I'm tired of being invisible." The room tried to form an alliance against me. It's what families do when a story they like gets rewritten. They circle the page. Mom's cheeks flushed. We thought you were making donations. You're being dramatic." "Donations?" I laughed, the sound unexpected and too loud. This wasn't charity. It was me choosing, repeatedly and under duress, to make sure your bills were paid so you could keep behaving like you earned it. I didn't sign up to be your invisible banking operation. I'm not your bailout fund. Lila's first instinct was to gaslight. "You're twisting this. When did you even—" When I looked at my account in August and realized my emergency fund was gone because I'd paid for 3 months of car payments so you could keep driving to interviews you never had, that's when, I said. When I had to cancel a vacation I needed because I paid a credit card minimum for you in November. That's when. When you told everyone at your last work event that you'd paid for that consulting course yourself and I wired the money to your card, That's when. She started to protest, to list excuses. I paid some of it back. I thought you were okay with it. The usual little defenses people build to keep their image intact. I heard them as if they were coming from a telescope, distant, irrelevant, trying to be bright. Then I did something I'd practiced in the mirror at night when I couldn't sleep. I opened the spreadsheet to the row that had Lila's name and the note that read wardrobe, a word she'd used in a breathless Instagram caption for new shoes, and I pushed it forward so everyone could see the dates. You bought a new work wardrobe in April, I said. Paid for it 2 days after I sent $900 in rent assistance. You told Mom it was an investment in your career. I paid for your shoes. Lila's face folded in a way that had once meant, I'm hurt, and now said, I'm discovered. She made a strangled sound and reached for the folder like she could grab back a part of herself. The room turned into a slow-motion collage of reactions, silent whispers, the kind of clicking intake of breath that happens before someone says, oh, the clumsy clearing of a throat as if to dislodge embarrassment. You've been manipulating us, I said to Mom, and it felt both like accusation and diagnosis. You've always known how to weaponize praise. You lean on Lila's success like it's a shield. You tell everyone she's the one who made good decisions and we all cheer. But the decisions that kept this house afloat, they were made by me, on nights when I was too exhausted to keep pretending everything was fine. Mom's face went hard, then soft, the way a person's expression shifts when they consider which mask to put on. Dad looked like he wanted to be invisible, like someone who'd been reading the wrong script for a long time. I stepped back because I needed air and because the dramatic gesture matches the moment. I'm not asking for a fight. I'm asking for truth. I am asking for acknowledgement and an actual plan. If you want me to keep helping you, we do it properly. Contracts, reimbursement, honesty, or I stop. Stop? Lila scoffed. So you're going to cut us off? Yes, I said. The word felt like a scalpel. Yes, I am. Because I will not make myself small to keep your empire polished. That was the revenge in its simplest form, withdrawal. The thing I'd been doing, what they had taken for granted, would cease to exist. I would not be the invisible safety net sewn into the hem of their lives. No sirens from my account would sneak into their cards at 2 a.m. any longer. You could see the immediate practical ripple. Mom's face lost its color. Dad's hand went to his pocket like he was looking for a phone number he'd never had to use. Lila's lips quivered, then pressed into a thin line, which was her attempt at composure. You can't just, she began. I already did, I said. I've set up a payment plan schedule in the spreadsheet. If you want to make good on the loans I covered, there's a realistic path. If you don't, I'll formalize it. I'm done funding the image of a family that won't say thank you for the labor keeping it upright. There was an ugly small sound, Aunt June again, like something halfway between a sniff and a smear. People started to murmur about embarrassment, about family loyalty, about how things shouldn't be aired. I looked at each of them, one at a time. This isn't shame to be fixed with a quick apology or a staged hug. This is financial abuse. You know exactly what that phrase means. It's where someone withholds resources or redirects them and leaves another person to barter for dignity. That's what you've been doing, and tonight I'm naming it. Naming it had weight. It was the kind of thing that makes people pivot from denial to defense. Mom's hands were shaking now. Lila's eyes were leaking that small, private fear that only comes when your scaffolding starts to wobble. Then, with the calm everyone reserves for emergencies and the absurdity of it all, I did one more thing. I stood up, gathered my folder, and walked to the coat rack. As of tomorrow, I said, I'm taking a contract in Seattle for a month. The words were practical. Cover letter, phone call, travel stipend. But the impact was theatrical. I'll be making more money there, and while I'm gone, I'm not wiring anything back into this house. You can either set up proper payments while I'm away, or you can figure out how to keep the lights on through other means. It wasn't a declaration of exile so much as a reallocation of priorities. I was leaving their drama in the dining room and taking myself to a place where people weren't allowed to treat me like free labor. Lila's face broke first. You can't leave like that, she whispered. You should have thought about how you treat people who cover the bills, I said. I took my coat, my folder under my arm like a shield, and as I opened the door, I heard Mom call my name in a way that was asking for the old arrangement. And I didn't go back. The car ride home felt like a private victory and a private mourning in the same breath. I'd wanted vindication, and I'd gotten it in the form of a hard, public truth. The revenge had been less about punishment and more about exposure. The family's shiny story had been built on overtime and secrecy, and when the scaffolding was pulled away, it looked, frankly, fragile. Out in the dark, the dashboard lights like small, honest stars. I let myself breathe. For the first time in a long time, I could imagine a sleep that wasn't scheduled around what bill I'd cover next. The folder on my lap was weighty and terrible and somehow freeing. 3 months passed. Seattle didn't fix me, it just gave me space. The kind of quiet that hums after a long emergency. The first week, I didn't check my phone. The second week, I started sleeping without my shoulders tense like I was waiting for an alarm that never came. By the third week, I realized I didn't feel guilty anymore for choosing myself. When you're a nurse, you learn about triage, about who needs saving first. Somewhere between IV pumps and shift changes, I'd forgotten that included me. Mom texted once, then twice, then called. The first voicemail was angry. The second was teary. The third was quiet. The kind of quiet that sounds like someone rehearsing an apology but not sure where to start. I didn't delete them. I just let them sit there, like evidence that she was capable of reflection, or at least discomfort. Lila waited longer. Her message came one night after I'd finished a shift that ran too late. I didn't realize how much I leaned on you. I'm trying to do better. Mom sold the extra car. Dad's picking up more work. I got a second job. You were right. It wasn't eloquent, but it was something. I didn't reply immediately. I wanted her to sit in the silence the way I'd had to. When I finally went back home for a visit, the house felt smaller. Not physically, just spiritually. The dining room where I'd been humiliated looked like a stage after the play ended. The table runner was gone, the centerpiece replaced with a cheap candle. Mom greeted me like a woman who'd met a version of her daughter she couldn't control anymore. Cautious, careful, almost reverent. Dinner was quieter this time. No bragging, no hierarchy, no golden child speeches. Just the sound of plates and the low hum of a family learning to speak without performance. At one point, Mom reached across the table and said, "I didn't know how bad it had gotten. I thought you just liked helping." I didn't say anything for a while. Then I said, "Helping isn't the same as being used." She nodded, really nodded, not the kind people do when they're waiting to argue. And for the first time in years, she didn't try to justify herself. After that, I left the receipts folder on the table. "Keep it," I said, "not as a weapon, as a reminder." Now I live in a small apartment with plants that thrive on neglect and a bank account that actually grows. I pick my shifts. I don't flinch when the phone rings. Sometimes I even scroll through Lila's posts. Fewer filters now, more reality. And I think maybe that's progress. Revenge doesn't always come as fire. Sometimes it's just distance, boundaries, and the silence that follows when people finally hear themselves echo. And that silence for me was peace.